Jasmine moved through the bustling dining room with practiced grace, a tray balanced effortlessly on one hand, her other hand adjusting the crisp white apron tied tightly around her waist. The chandeliers above sparkled with artificial brilliance, casting golden light across polished wine glasses and porcelain plates. The clink of silverware, murmurs of business talk, and the occasional laugh from well-dressed patrons wove into a symphony of wealth and privilege. Amid it all, Jasmine glided with the calm of someone used to blending into the backdrop. She wore her natural curls pulled into a tight bun, and her uniform, though plain, was spotless. Her smile came easily, but her eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. Every tip counted. Every compliment, every mistake, every shift mattered. The restaurant was more than just a place of work. It was her battleground, her proving ground, her stage. To the customers, she was Miss or Ma'am, never by her name. They noticed her grace but not her grit, her politeness but not the exhaustion behind it. Her job was to make others feel important while being invisible herself. At home, Jasmine's world was very different. A cramped apartment she shared with her younger brother Malik and their grandmother, Nana Ruth. Bills came too fast. Groceries ran out too soon. Her tips stretched thin across too many needs, and yet, she never let Malik see the weight she carried. He was just starting high school and needed hope, not worry. She gave him both in abundance. Jasmine had always believed she could rise above it all. She read books in the staff break room during lunch and listened to business podcasts while scrubbing dishes. She dreamed of opening her own cafe one day, a place that celebrated Black culture, where young women like her could walk in and see themselves not just as workers but as owners, creators, leaders. But dreams were expensive, and reality never gave discounts. Discrimination was rarely loud. It was the side glances, the assumptions, the way certain customers questioned her competence before she even opened her mouth. It was the manager calling her sweetheart while giving a male server with less experience the higher-paying section. It was the corporate couple who insisted she speak to someone more senior, then left a $2 tip on a $100 tab. Still, she smiled. Still, she served. On the surface, Jasmine was composed, even radiant. But under that calm was a slow-burning fire. A fury she had learned to control, to direct, to fuel her ambition. She refused to become bitter, but neither would she pretend things were fair. She knew better. On this particular Friday night, the restaurant buzzed louder than usual. A citywide finance convention meant more suits, more cards with heavy limits, and more people treating the servers like part of the furniture. Jasmine moved with practiced rhythm, topping off wine glasses, clearing plates, answering questions about the seared duck breast and the vegan risotto. Then came the shift in energy, subtle but unmistakable. The maitre d' adjusted his tie. A table near the corner was reset for one. The head chef peeked out from the kitchen doors. Jasmine, balancing a tray of desserts, caught the ripple of whispers. "He's here," someone muttered behind her. Jasmine placed the tray carefully on the sideboard and straightened her spine. She didn't need to ask who he was. Mr. Carter. Rumor had it he was worth 8 figures. Owned tech firms. Sat on boards. Flew private. He was irregular, though unpredictable in timing and temperament. He tipped big but only if impressed, and his standards were impossibly high. Some said he enjoyed watching people scramble. Tonight, Jasmine would be his server. She approached the corner table with practiced warmth. "Good evening, Mr. Carter. Welcome back. May I offer you our wine list?" He barely looked at her. Instead, he reached for the menu with one hand, his eyes scanning her slowly with the other. Jasmine stood still, maintaining her composure. His gaze was invasive, clinical. "Wine list," he echoed, then chuckled dryly. "You think you know wine?" The words dropped like a cold stone between them. Jasmine hesitated, then smiled. "I've been trained on the list extensively, sir. I'd be happy to recommend something that pairs well with your meal." Mr. Carter finally looked her in the eye. "You've been trained, huh?" he said, emphasizing the word with an almost mocking tone. "That's cute." The smile on her face faltered, just for a moment. He leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "Bring me the 09 Margot. And tell your manager I expect my meal comp tonight. For the inconvenience of having amateurs serve me." Jasmine stood perfectly still, heart thudding in her chest. Her fingers twitched at her sides. Every instinct screamed to react, to defend herself, to remind him that she was not his servant, nor an inconvenience. But years of working in hospitality had taught her one truth: dignity sometimes came at the cost of silence. "Of course, Mr. Carter," she said quietly, turning away before he could see the fire in her eyes. She moved back toward the kitchen, the weight of the moment pressing heavily against her chest. Her thoughts raced. This was what she fought against every day. Not just the insult, but the assumption behind it. That she didn't belong here. That her competence was performative. That her value was tied only to how well she could endure mistreatment. The restaurant didn't stop for her pain. Dishes still needed delivering. Water still needed pouring. Jasmine moved on autopilot, but her mind was no longer in the room. She was staring down something bigger now, something personal. Mr. Carter's words had cut deeper than any late shift or stingy tip. They had reopened an old wound she'd been working hard to close. It wasn't just about a rude customer. It was about being told again that no matter how polished, how smart, how hard-working she was, people like him would still see her as less. And she was done accepting that. The night carried on, but something had shifted in Jasmine. She could feel it, like a thread pulled too tight in her chest. Mr. Carter's insult didn't just sting, it sparked something. A quiet rebellion. She wouldn't say anything. Not yet. But something had changed. And change was powerful. Jasmine sat frozen, her mind reeling from the sting of Mr. Carter's words. The insult wasn't just personal, it was laced with layers of judgment and stereotype, dismissing not only her intellect but her very presence in the room. The words echoed in her ears long after they were spoken, reverberating with the weight of history, assumption, and quiet resentment. Around her, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Some averted their eyes, others exchanged glances, uncertain whether to speak or stay silent. She felt heat rise to her face, not just from embarrassment but from a boiling frustration she could no longer ignore. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her. But this moment felt sharper, more public, more cutting. Mr. Carter had said what many might have thought but never dared to voice aloud. In that single sentence, he had reduced her to a caricature, a girl who didn't belong, who hadn't earned her place, who was presumed to be a product of pity or diversity quotas rather than merit. Jasmine stared at her notebook, trying to gather herself. Her pen trembled in her fingers. She had a choice: swallow her pride and let the moment pass, or confront the arrogance head-on. The room waited. Mr. Carter had already moved on with his lecture, unfazed by the damage he had done. But the tension in the room betrayed the impact of his words. Some students fidgeted, others shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Inside, Jasmine's thoughts churned. Was it safer to remain silent, to be the better person? Or was silence another form of surrender, another concession to the assumption that people like her should be grateful just to be in the room? She thought of all the times she had bitten her tongue, the times she'd told herself it wasn't worth it. But now, something cracked open. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, clear, and louder than anyone expected. "Mr. Carter, with all due respect, I'd appreciate it if you evaluated my work, not your assumptions about me." The room went still. All eyes turned to her. Some widened in shock, others in admiration. Mr. Carter paused mid-sentence, blinking in surprise. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. The authority he had wielded so casually was now being openly questioned. He cleared his throat and forced a tight smile, but the damage was done. The dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably. Jasmine's words didn't just defend her, they challenged the unspoken hierarchy in the room, the invisible lines of power, identity, and expectation. It wasn't just about her anymore. In speaking up, she became a symbol for others who had swallowed similar insults, who had stayed quiet for fear of being labeled difficult or angry or ungrateful. There was a ripple effect. Later, after class, students approached her quietly. Some offered words of support, others simply nodded in solidarity. They knew what it meant to stand up in a space not built for you. They understood the courage it took to push back without being labeled a troublemaker. For the first time, Jasmine felt both alone and surrounded, isolated by the experience but connected by the shared understanding it unearthed. Mr. Carter, on the other hand, didn't address the confrontation directly. He carried on with the course as though nothing had happened, though his tone toward Jasmine shifted. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, only a slight stiffness in his demeanor. He no longer dismissed her ideas so easily, but the warmth was gone. It was a cold truce, an uneasy recognition of her presence, now impossible to ignore. The confrontation marked a turning point for Jasmine. It wasn't a moment of triumph, exactly, it came with a cost. Speaking out meant stepping into a spotlight she hadn't sought. There were whispers in the hallway, second glances, and subtle shifts in how she was treated. Some professors grew more cautious around her, as though worried she might challenge them too. Others began to respect her more openly, seeing her not just as a student, but as someone unafraid to speak truth to power. Internally, Jasmine wrestled with the aftermath. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She didn't want to be seen as a symbol or a spokesperson. She just wanted to learn, to grow, to be seen for who she was. But the reality was more complicated. That moment in class had changed how others saw her and how she saw herself. She began to walk with a straighter spine, her steps more deliberate. In conversations, she spoke with a newfound confidence, not from arrogance, but from the understanding that her voice mattered. She no longer second-guessed her questions or shrank from disagreement. Instead, she leaned into the discomfort, willing to challenge ideas, to defend her perspective, to be bold. And yet, it wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, nights when she replayed the confrontation and wondered if she had done the right thing. She worried about being misunderstood, about being resented. But in her heart, she knew the truth: if she hadn't spoken, the silence would have haunted her more than any backlash. She also realized that strength doesn't always come from dominance. Sometimes, it's in the quiet determination to keep showing up, to keep speaking, to keep being seen, even when it's uncomfortable. Jasmine's power didn't lie in shouting others down, it was in refusing to disappear, in insisting on her right to exist fully, intelligently, unapologetically. The sting of Mr. Carter's words lingered, but it became a catalyst rather than a wound. From it, Jasmine drew clarity, resolve, and a deeper understanding of the unspoken rules of the spaces she navigated. She saw now that progress didn't always come from agreement, but from disruption, from the courage to say what needed to be said, even when no one else would. The classroom, once a place of quiet compliance, had transformed into a stage where identity, power, and voice collided. Jasmine had stepped into that space not by choice, but by necessity. And in doing so, she left an impression that could not be undone. The confrontation quickly becomes the center of attention, with news spreading like wildfire across multiple platforms. What began as a personal moment between Jasmine and Mr. Carter escalates into a public discourse, polarizing opinions and magnifying the stakes involved. The narrative surrounding the incident is shaped by a myriad of voices, some sympathetic, others critical, each attempting to define the meaning and consequence of Jasmine's actions. At her workplace, the atmosphere shifts almost overnight. Colleagues who once shared casual conversations now treat her with caution or avoid engagement altogether. Subtle changes in behavior, glances exchanged in hushed tones, whispered remarks that stop abruptly when she approaches make the environment tense and isolating. The company's leadership, under pressure from various stakeholders, approaches Jasmine with thinly veiled concerns. They stress the importance of professionalism and warn about maintaining the company's image, implying that her outspoken stance may jeopardize not only her position but also the team's cohesion. Despite the lack of direct reprimands, the implicit message is clear: her boldness has upset a delicate balance, and continuing down this path could be costly. Beyond the office walls, social media becomes an unpredictable arena. Clips of the confrontation go viral, edited and shared across platforms with captions that sway public opinion in multiple directions. For some, Jasmine emerges as a heroine, someone brave enough to challenge authority and speak out against injustice. For others, she is cast as disruptive or overly sensitive, accused of seeking attention or stirring trouble unnecessarily. The comments sections overflow with heated debates, many of which turn hostile. Personal attacks and derogatory remarks become commonplace, blurring the line between critique and harassment. The onslaught of negativity weighs heavily on Jasmine, affecting her confidence and peace of mind. Her own community's reaction is complex and fractured. While some friends and neighbors express solidarity, offering quiet support and words of encouragement, others respond with skepticism or disapproval. Cultural expectations and social dynamics come into play, where standing up to a powerful figure is seen by some as reckless or damaging to the collective reputation. Certain community members suggest that Jasmine should have handled the situation more discreetly or advised her to choose her battles wisely. These sentiments reflect the tension between individual agency and communal harmony, complicating Jasmine's emotional landscape. At the center of this turmoil stands Mr. Carter, whose influence reaches far beyond the immediate incident. Known for his social standing and connections, he leverages his power to counteract Jasmine's growing visibility. Publicly, he adopts a narrative of misunderstanding and reconciliation, framing himself as wronged and willing to move past the incident for the sake of peace. Privately, however, there are clear attempts to undermine Jasmine. Offers of financial settlements and suggestions to quietly withdraw surface through intermediaries, accompanied by veiled warnings about the consequences of defiance. These pressures come with a mix of intimidation and enticement, testing Jasmine's resolve. The impact of Mr. Carter's reach becomes evident in subtle but damaging ways. Professional opportunities Jasmine had been cultivating suddenly evaporate. Invitations to collaborate or participate in projects are rescinded without explanation. Rumors circulate, painting her as difficult or unreliable, further isolating her from potential allies. The cumulative effect is to create an environment where Jasmine feels increasingly vulnerable and marginalized, as if her efforts to assert herself have triggered a backlash that threatens to engulf her. Emotionally, Jasmine wrestles with an exhausting duality. On one hand, she is fortified by the righteousness of her stance, convinced of the necessity to speak truth despite the costs. On the other, the relentless scrutiny and hostility chip away at her resilience, stirring doubts and fears. She finds herself caught between the desire to maintain her dignity and the instinct to protect herself from harm. The balancing act becomes precarious, as every decision carries weighty consequences for her personal and professional life. In private moments, Jasmine turns to writing as a form of solace and reflection. Journaling allows her to process the barrage of emotions and clarify her thoughts amid the chaos. These writings are deeply personal, unfiltered accounts of her experiences, hopes, and frustrations. They serve as a refuge, a space where she can assert control over her narrative without fear of judgment or reprisal. This introspective practice becomes a vital tool for maintaining her mental well-being and reinforcing her commitment to her principles. Through this journey, Jasmine gains a deeper understanding of the power dynamics at play. She realizes that words themselves are potent weapons capable of inspiring change, but also triggering fierce resistance. Her confrontation has illuminated the fragile boundaries between speaking out and being silenced, between courage and vulnerability. It becomes clear that the battle is not solely against an individual but against entrenched systems of influence and control that resist disruption. The chapter also explores the social mechanisms that enforce conformity and silence dissent. It highlights how those in positions of power can manipulate narratives to maintain dominance, using resources and relationships to pressure individuals into submission. Jasmine's experience exemplifies this broader pattern, illustrating how personal courage intersects with systemic obstacles. The tension between individual agency and institutional power is a persistent theme, underscoring the complexity of effecting change. Despite these daunting challenges, Jasmine finds unexpected sources of support. Messages from strangers who admire her bravery, discreet gestures from colleagues who quietly stand by her, and words of encouragement from community members remind her that she is not alone. These moments of solidarity provide glimmers of hope, reinforcing her resolve and underscoring the potential impact of her actions beyond the immediate conflict. The stakes continue to rise as Jasmine contemplates her next steps. The choice before her is stark: to stand firm and face the escalating consequences or to retreat in order to preserve her safety and stability. Neither option offers certainty or ease. To persist means enduring further hardship, but it also affirms her commitment to justice and self-respect. To withdraw might bring temporary relief but at the cost of compromising her values and allowing oppressive forces to prevail. This internal struggle captures the essence of the chapter's theme, words as weapons. It illustrates how language and expression can serve as tools of empowerment as well as instruments of control. Jasmine's journey embodies the courage required to wield words effectively in a world that often seeks to mute dissent. The narrative does not romanticize her plight but presents it with nuance, acknowledging the complexity of navigating power structures and personal convictions. Ultimately, the chapter closes with Jasmine poised at a crossroads. She recognizes that the path ahead will be difficult and uncertain, but her sense of dignity and purpose compel her to move forward. The confrontation, once a singular event, has become a catalyst for deeper change both within herself and in the environment around her. Her story reflects the broader realities faced by many who dare to challenge authority and use their voices as weapons for justice and truth. The battle Jasmine had been waging against Mr. Carter's powerful influence was relentless and exhausting. Despite her unwavering determination and clear sense of justice, the magnitude of Carter's reach often made her feel isolated and vulnerable. His name was synonymous with control and fear. His empire spanned industries, media outlets, and political alliances, casting a shadow over everything Jasmine was trying to change. For a long time, she stood alone in her fight, relying on her own voice and limited network to push back against a titan seemingly untouchable. Then, unexpectedly, a new force appeared, someone from a world closely connected to Carter, yet distinct enough to bring a fresh perspective and invaluable assistance. This person was Lawrence Whitaker, a man who had once been a formidable competitor to Mr. Carter but had since receded from the public eye. Whitaker's relationship with Carter was complicated. Once adversaries in a high-stakes business rivalry, Whitaker had lost ground in the past but had quietly watched Carter's rise and excesses with growing concern. Though they had clashed in the past, Whitaker had come to respect Jasmine's courage and clarity, seeing in her the very qualities he wished he had possessed in his battles against Carter. Whitaker's arrival was more than a mere gesture of support, it was a turning point. Unlike the usual voices in Jasmine's corner, Whitaker brought with him decades of experience navigating the complex webs of power and influence. He understood Carter's tactics, the subtle manipulations, the public distractions, and the hidden threats behind closed doors. More importantly, Whitaker had access to resources and connections that Jasmine could never have imagined. His entry into her campaign changed the dynamic entirely. From the outset, Whitaker's approach was strategic and patient. He didn't attempt to overshadow Jasmine but instead empowered her, helping her recognize her own strength and resilience. In private meetings, he shared stories of his own failures and lessons learned, emphasizing the importance of persistence and adaptability. Whitaker's respect for Jasmine's vision and moral clarity helped her regain confidence when doubt crept in. His faith in her fueled her determination, reminding her that she was not merely battling a man but challenging an entire system. Beyond encouragement, Whitaker's contributions were practical and transformative. Using his extensive network, he connected Jasmine with influential journalists who had previously been hesitant to cover her story. With Whitaker's endorsement, media outlets began to see Jasmine as a credible and important figure, rather than a lone activist on the fringes. This shift dramatically widened her platform, enabling her to reach a larger audience and draw attention to the injustices she sought to expose. Furthermore, Whitaker introduced Jasmine to seasoned legal experts and political strategists who could help build a stronger case against Carter. These professionals offered advice on how to navigate the legal landscape and public relations battles, ensuring that Jasmine's efforts would be more focused and impactful. The alliance also facilitated discreet investigations into Carter's dealings, uncovering information that had been meticulously hidden beneath layers of corporate secrecy. As this new support system took shape, Jasmine's message gained clarity and force. No longer was she fighting with mere passion, she wielded facts, evidence, and a strategic framework that made it harder for Carter to dismiss her. The public began to question the narrative that Carter had carefully constructed over the years. What had seemed like an untouchable empire now appeared vulnerable to scrutiny. Mr. Carter's response to this unexpected challenge was swift but conflicted. His initial dismissal of Jasmine as a minor irritant revealed his underestimation of the growing movement. However, as the tide turned, Carter's confidence visibly waned. Internal communications leaked, revealing a man forced to confront an opposition he had not anticipated. His usual tactics of intimidation and media manipulation were less effective against a movement backed by credible allies and widespread public support. Whitaker's presence in Jasmine's corner sent a clear message: Carter's dominance was no longer absolute. The balance of power had shifted, forcing him to reconsider his approach. This forced Carter to divert resources to damage control, respond to legal challenges, and engage in a more cautious public posture. The energy that once fueled his unchallenged authority now had to be spent on managing vulnerabilities and uncertainty. For Jasmine, the alliance with Whitaker was more than a practical advantage, it was a symbol of change. It demonstrated that the system Carter had built could be challenged not just by external voices but from within his own world. Whitaker's support helped Jasmine see that courage and conviction could inspire unlikely allies and that the path to justice was strengthened by collaboration. Together, Jasmine and Whitaker crafted a new narrative, one that emphasized transparency, accountability, and empowerment. They harnessed the power of media, legal scrutiny, and public engagement to amplify their message and expose the cracks in Carter's facade. This approach shifted the story from a personal struggle into a broader movement for systemic change, capturing the attention and imagination of a growing audience. The impact of this alliance was profound and immediate. Jasmine's platform expanded rapidly, allowing her to advocate for reforms and challenge entrenched interests more effectively. Her influence grew beyond local circles to national prominence, forcing Carter and his associates to operate with greater caution and accountability. The revelation that a figure like Whitaker, a man with intimate knowledge of Carter's world, had joined forces with Jasmine undermined Carter's aura of invincibility and emboldened others who had been silent. As public support swelled, Carter's strategies became increasingly defensive. He attempted to negotiate behind the scenes, seeking to contain the damage and regain control. But the alliance between Jasmine and Whitaker had already changed the landscape. The story's trajectory shifted decisively, moving from a contest of individual wills to a battle for the future of power and justice. Jasmine's transformation was not just external. With Whitaker's mentorship, she grew into a more confident and skilled leader. She learned to navigate the complexities of public discourse, legal challenges, and political strategy with greater finesse. More than that, she embraced her role as a symbol of hope and resilience for those who had long suffered in silence. Her journey became one of empowerment, not just for herself but for a community ready to reclaim its voice. The unexpected ally who had once been an adversary brought more than resources and connections. He brought perspective, encouragement, and a bridge to a new way of confronting entrenched power. Through their partnership, Jasmine's campaign evolved into a formidable force, capable of reshaping narratives and redefining the rules of engagement. In the end, the alliance compelled Mr. Carter to face a reality he had long avoided: that his reign was not unchallengeable and that new leaders, bold, resourceful, and united, could change the course of history. This turning point marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Jasmine, but for the entire community that had rallied behind her cause. It was a testament to the power of unexpected alliances and the enduring strength of courage combined with strategy. Jasmine found herself caught in an emotional whirlwind that seemed impossible to escape. Though she had gained an ally in Marcus, a rare source of support amidst the growing storm, the comfort it brought was fragile and fleeting. The aftermath of her courageous decision to speak out had unleashed a wave of consequences that quickly eroded the life she had carefully built. The backlash was swift and relentless, touching every corner of her existence from her professional world to her personal relationships and threatening to unravel everything she held dear. At work, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Where once she had been seen as a reliable and valued team member, Jasmine now encountered suspicion and coldness. Her supervisor, who previously praised her efforts, had become distant, his demeanor stiff and unapproachable. Meetings that once included her input were now held without her presence, emails were ignored or delayed, and important projects were reassigned. These actions, though subtle, were clear signs of exclusion and distrust. The threat to her job was palpable even if never explicitly stated. The unspoken message was that her future at the company was uncertain. This silent form of professional ostracism weighed heavily on Jasmine's mind, filling her with anxiety that grew with each passing day. Outside of work, Jasmine's social circle began to fracture. Some friends, unable or unwilling to confront the controversy surrounding her, quietly distanced themselves. Invitations to gatherings dwindled until they disappeared altogether. Conversations became strained and awkward when they did occur, as if an invisible barrier had formed between her and those she once trusted. The isolation was devastating. Jasmine grappled with feelings of abandonment and betrayal, compounded by the fact that the silence from her friends was louder than any harsh words could have been. She felt as though she were being punished not for what she had done, but for daring to challenge the status quo. This growing isolation triggered a wave of self-doubt. Jasmine found herself repeatedly questioning her decisions and motivations. Was standing up for what she believed in worth this personal cost? Had she been naive to think that courage would be met with support rather than resistance? These thoughts consumed her, creating a cyclical pattern of hope and despair. Some nights, she lay awake, her mind racing with fears about losing her job, alienating those closest to her, and jeopardizing her future. The weight of these anxieties often felt suffocating, and she struggled to maintain the strength she had shown earlier. Despite the difficulties, Marcus remained a steadfast ally. His support was a beacon of hope amid the darkening landscape of Jasmine's life. He stood by her side, offering encouragement and understanding when others turned away. However, even this alliance was not without its challenges. Marcus too began to experience repercussions from their association. Colleagues questioned his loyalty, and whispers followed him in the office corridors. Jasmine saw the toll this took on him, the fatigue etched into his face, the hesitance in his voice, and the occasional moments of frustration he tried to conceal. This knowledge only deepened Jasmine's feelings of guilt and responsibility. She was painfully aware that her stand was not just impacting her own life, but also the lives of those who chose to support her. The emotional toll of this period was immense. Jasmine's confidence wavered, and she found herself grappling with loneliness more intensely than before. She became guarded, retreating into herself, afraid to reach out for fear of further rejection. The vibrant woman who had once approached life with passion and determination was now shadowed by doubt and exhaustion. Physical symptoms manifested as well: sleepless nights, a loss of appetite, and a persistent tension that settled deep in her muscles. These signs were clear indicators that the stress was affecting her well-being, yet she felt trapped in a cycle she couldn't break. In an effort to find some release, Jasmine turned inward, revisiting an old habit she had abandoned years ago: writing. Initially, she jotted down fragmented thoughts and raw emotions in a small, worn notebook. This act of expression became a sanctuary where she could process her fears and frustrations without judgment. As days passed, the writing evolved, providing clarity amid the confusion. The pages reflected her journey through doubt, isolation, and the growing realization that resilience often emerges from the quietest moments. Writing allowed Jasmine to reclaim a sense of control over her narrative, helping her to make sense of the chaos surrounding her. This period of introspection also led Jasmine to re-evaluate her understanding of courage and strength. She recognized that bravery did not always manifest in grand gestures or visible triumphs. Sometimes, it was the quiet decision to keep moving forward in the face of overwhelming odds. The absence of support, the threat to her career, and the erosion of her social network did not diminish the validity of her stand. Instead, they underscored the magnitude of the sacrifice she was making. Jasmine began to internalize that resilience was not about winning immediate battles, but about sustaining oneself long enough to face the challenges ahead. As the chapter unfolds, the tension builds. Jasmine stands on the precipice of change, her emotional lows serving to heighten the stakes of the conflict to come. The storm she fears is not yet upon her, but its approach is undeniable. The quiet before it is heavy with anticipation, a moment of pause filled with both dread and determination. Jasmine's journey through isolation and doubt sets the stage for her eventual resurgence. Her inner strength, forged in solitude and tempered by hardship, prepares her for the challenges that lie ahead. This chapter paints a vivid portrait of the complex emotions that accompany standing up for one's beliefs in the face of overwhelming adversity. Jasmine's experience captures the loneliness of resistance and the personal costs of integrity. It explores how the loss of external support can be as difficult to bear as any direct confrontation, and how moments of vulnerability are an integral part of the path to empowerment. By delving deeply into her emotional state, the narrative elevates the stakes and adds depth to her character, making her eventual comeback all the more powerful and compelling. In the midst of her struggle, Jasmine's story becomes a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It highlights the painful but necessary process of enduring hardship in order to emerge stronger. Her fears and uncertainties, while daunting, serve as catalysts for growth rather than signals to retreat. The chapter closes with a sense of cautious hope, a recognition that while the coming storm may be fierce, the quiet strength she has cultivated will carry her through it. The aftermath is not an end, but a critical juncture in her journey, a moment of preparation for the challenges that will test her resolve and ultimately define her path forward. Jasmine found herself caught in a complex web of external pressures and internal doubts, each feeding into the other in ways that often left her exhausted and uncertain. On the surface, she was navigating the familiar challenges of a demanding workplace, subtle politics, veiled criticisms, and the ever-present pressure to prove herself. Yet beneath that surface lay a deeper, more personal struggle, one that touched the very core of her identity and sense of self-worth. The office environment had always been competitive, but lately, the atmosphere felt particularly charged. After her recent project was publicly scrutinized in a company-wide meeting, Jasmine became the subject of whispered conversations and skeptical glances. Some colleagues questioned her decisions, while others seemed hesitant to include her in key discussions. The criticism was never overt or outright hostile, it came in the form of carefully veiled comments and side conversations, making it harder to address directly. This subtle resistance created an invisible barrier that Jasmine had to confront daily. At first, she tried to meet the challenge with the same determination that had driven her career thus far. She worked longer hours, double-checked every detail, and sought reassurance from trusted mentors. However, despite her efforts, the unease only grew. The external pressures began to seep into her mind, stirring up old insecurities that had long been dormant. She started questioning not just her decisions but her capabilities and, ultimately, her right to occupy the space she had fought so hard to claim. Flashbacks emerged during quiet moments, memories that revealed the roots of both her strength and vulnerability. She recalled her childhood, growing up in a household where achievement was both expected and scrutinized. Her parents, though supportive, held high standards that often felt like an unspoken measure of her worth. She remembered the sting of not quite meeting those expectations, the subtle disappointment in their eyes when she faltered. Yet, those early experiences also taught her resilience. Each setback was met with an inner promise to try harder, to be better, to prove herself again. One particular memory stood out: a moment from her university years when a professor had dismissed her ideas during a seminar. The professor's words, casual but cutting, echoed in her mind: "You have potential, but you lack confidence." That moment had marked her deeply, planting a seed of self-doubt that she carried into her professional life. Over time, she learned to mask it with a confident exterior, but the internal battle never truly disappeared. The internal struggle was not limited to self-doubt. Jasmine wrestled with her sense of identity, particularly as a woman in a male-dominated field. The subtle biases she encountered daily, the expectations to conform to certain behaviors, and the occasional outright dismissiveness chipped away at her self-image. She found herself wondering whether she was being authentic or simply performing a role designed to fit in. The tension between being true to herself and adapting to the environment created an exhausting cognitive dissonance. Amidst these struggles, Jasmine experienced moments of clarity that illuminated a path forward. One evening, after a particularly draining day, she sat quietly and reflected on her journey. She recognized that the external challenges, while real and difficult, were not the sole source of her distress. The deeper issue was how she allowed those external voices to define her internal narrative. The harsh judgments, the politics, the subtle exclusions, they only gained power because she granted it by internalizing them. This realization sparked a mental shift. Jasmine began to reframe her perspective on the obstacles she faced. Instead of viewing criticism as a reflection of her inadequacy, she started seeing it as a challenge to grow and refine her approach. Rather than trying to control others' perceptions, she focused on what she could control: her responses, her mindset, and her sense of self. She also sought out connections that nurtured rather than drained her. Conversations with trusted friends and mentors became a source of strength. They reminded her of her capabilities and validated her experiences, helping to counterbalance the negativity that sometimes felt overwhelming. Through these interactions, Jasmine began to rebuild her confidence from the inside out. At work, she experimented with setting clearer boundaries and asserting herself in new ways. When faced with dismissive comments, she practiced responding calmly but firmly, reclaiming her voice without resorting to defensiveness. She recognized the importance of choosing her battles wisely, conserving her energy for moments that truly mattered. This strategic approach allowed her to maintain professionalism while protecting her mental well-being. Gradually, Jasmine's resilience deepened. She learned to embrace vulnerability as part of her strength rather than a weakness to be hidden. Acknowledging her doubts and fears did not diminish her; instead, it made her more relatable and human, both to herself and others. This authenticity fostered deeper connections and a more supportive environment around her. The chapter also explores how Jasmine's evolving self-awareness influenced her long-term goals. No longer was success solely defined by external achievements or validation. Instead, it became intertwined with personal fulfillment and integrity. She recognized that reclaiming control of her narrative meant defining success on her own terms, rather than allowing others' expectations to dictate her path. Throughout this period of growth, Jasmine's story highlights the intricate interplay between external and internal struggles. Battling the shadows outside criticism, exclusion, politics was inseparable from confronting the shadows within: doubt, fear, fragmented identity. This duality underscored the complexity of her journey and the profound courage required to navigate it. Ultimately, Jasmine's experience exemplifies resilience as a dynamic process, not a fixed trait. It involves constant negotiation between pressures and responses, setbacks and breakthroughs. Her journey shows that strength emerges not from the absence of struggle but from the willingness to face it honestly and adaptively. By the chapter's end, Jasmine stands more firmly grounded. She has begun to reclaim her narrative with a renewed sense of agency and clarity. The battles continue, but her relationship to them has transformed. No longer defined or diminished by the shadows around her, she moves forward with a growing lightness of being ready to shape her future with intentionality and self-compassion. Jasmine, galvanized by the encouragement and insight of her trusted ally, begins to develop a strategic plan aimed at exposing not only Mr. Carter's arrogance but the deeper systemic problems entrenched within the institution he represents. This plan is crafted carefully, with a clear understanding that confronting Mr. Carter alone is insufficient. Instead, the focus shifts to revealing the broader culture of oppression and neglect that has allowed his abuses of power to persist unchecked. Recognizing the need to amplify voices beyond her own, Jasmine and her ally set out to build a movement grounded in media influence, public engagement, and community solidarity. Their first priority is to gather undeniable evidence that reveals the true nature of Mr. Carter's leadership. Jasmine spends days collecting testimonies from fellow students and faculty members who have experienced his authoritarianism and witnessed the institution's failure to address discrimination and inequality. These accounts, rich with personal detail, serve as the backbone of their campaign. Alongside these narratives, Jasmine compiles documents and records of administrative decisions that showcase patterns of favoritism, intimidation, and a blatant disregard for fairness. With this evidence in hand, the next step is to engage the media. Jasmine and her ally reach out to independent journalists and bloggers who have a reputation for tackling social justice issues. They prepare a comprehensive press kit, designed to provide a compelling and factual case against Mr. Carter. The strategy hinges on controlling the narrative before the opposition can twist the facts or dismiss the claims as mere dissent. Jasmine's interviews are marked by her calm, measured tone, her arguments built on truth and clarity rather than emotion, making it difficult for skeptics to discredit her. The media coverage begins to ripple through the community, sparking widespread conversation. Social media platforms amplify Jasmine's message, drawing in support from those previously unaware of the institution's internal dynamics. The movement gains momentum as more individuals come forward, emboldened by Jasmine's leadership and the growing visibility of the issues at hand. It becomes clear that the problem is not just about one person but about a system that prioritizes power over justice. Understanding that media exposure alone will not sustain long-term change, Jasmine shifts her focus to fostering community involvement. She organizes a series of public forums on campus, inviting students, faculty, and even concerned community members to participate in open discussions about the institution's flaws and the potential paths forward. These forums become a safe space where individuals can share their stories, frustrations, and hopes without fear of retaliation. Jasmine's role in these gatherings is not to dominate the conversation but to listen deeply and facilitate collective healing and empowerment. During these meetings, the idea of forming a coalition takes shape. This coalition is envisioned as a diverse, representative body that transcends individual grievances and unites stakeholders under a shared commitment to accountability and reform. Jasmine's ally assists in drafting a mission statement and a clear set of goals, emphasizing transparency, inclusivity, and sustained advocacy. The coalition becomes the movement's organizational backbone, channeling energy and resources into coordinated actions. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter grows increasingly uneasy. His attempts to downplay the allegations, issue vague promises of reform, and manipulate public perception only serve to highlight his unwillingness to genuinely address the concerns raised. Jasmine anticipates these tactics and prepares the coalition to respond swiftly and effectively, refusing to let the narrative be co-opted or diluted. One of Jasmine's most significant moves involves stepping into the spotlight through public speaking engagements. She accepts an invitation to address a local town hall meeting, knowing that this platform will reach beyond the confines of the campus and draw attention from the broader community. Her speech is carefully crafted to weave personal experiences with an incisive critique of systemic failures. Rather than targeting Mr. Carter as an individual villain, she frames the issue as a collective challenge, one that requires collective solutions. Her address resonates deeply, evoking empathy and a sense of urgency among listeners. Local activists and community leaders begin to align themselves with the coalition, offering solidarity, resources, and networks. The movement expands organically, fueled by the shared recognition that the struggle for justice within this institution reflects larger societal inequities. In tandem with these efforts, the coalition formulates a detailed list of demands aimed at instituting real change. These include calls for an independent investigation into administrative misconduct, the establishment of transparent grievance procedures, increased diversity in leadership positions, and mandatory training programs on equity and inclusion. Importantly, the coalition presents these demands not as vague requests but as actionable, well-researched proposals. To build pressure, they launch a petition that quickly accumulates thousands of signatures from students, faculty, and community supporters alike. Organized peaceful protests follow, marked by a spirit of determination and hope rather than confrontation. Participants carry signs that emphasize justice, accountability, and renewal. The movement's visibility grows, with local news outlets covering the demonstrations and editorials highlighting the need for reform. The narrative has clearly shifted from a fringe complaint to a mainstream call for change. Faced with mounting opposition, Mr. Carter arranges a press conference intending to regain control of the narrative. His speech, however, reveals his isolation. Attempts to discredit Jasmine and portray the movement as misguided or unruly fall flat in the face of pointed questions from reporters well versed in the coalition's claims. The contrast between his evasiveness and Jasmine's steadfast clarity further undermines his credibility. The culmination of these efforts is a public assembly convened by the university leadership, where the coalition is invited to present its case directly. This assembly, attended by students, faculty, community members, and the Board of Trustees, becomes a defining moment. Jasmine speaks with a composed yet passionate voice, articulating not only the movement's demands but also the deeper need for institutional transformation. Under the weight of overwhelming evidence and public pressure, several board members express their support for the coalition's proposals. They criticize Mr. Carter's leadership and acknowledge the necessity of meaningful reform. The board's shifting stance leaves Mr. Carter increasingly marginalized. The power dynamics that once favored him have been decisively upended. Through this carefully orchestrated plan, Jasmine achieves a significant victory, the transformation of a fragmented struggle into a unified movement capable of holding power accountable. Her leadership transcends the personal, it becomes a blueprint for systemic change. By leveraging media, public speaking, and community engagement, she not only exposes the flaws within the institution but also mobilizes a collective force determined to reshape it. The momentum generated by the movement promises a new chapter for the institution, one where transparency, equity, and justice take precedence over arrogance and repression. Jasmine's journey illustrates the power of strategic action, collaboration, and resilience in the face of entrenched systems. The chapter closes with a palpable sense of anticipation, setting the stage for a dramatic showdown that will determine the future course of the institution and those who call it home. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a tension that seemed to pulse through every corner of the room. Whether it was a grand public forum, a fierce social media debate, or a high-stakes corporate board meeting, the moment had arrived for Jasmine to lay everything bare. All eyes were on her, including the piercing gaze of Mr. Carter, a man accustomed to commanding attention and control. Yet, Jasmine was not intimidated. Instead, she radiated a quiet strength, poised and ready to deliver a message that would ripple far beyond this single confrontation. She began by speaking her truth with an intensity born from years of experience and frustration. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate and clear. There was no hesitation or wavering, every sentence carried weight, backed by both emotion and intellect. Jasmine did not merely recount personal grievances, she articulated a broader narrative of systemic injustice, subtle biases, and entrenched prejudices that had long shaped the environment in which she and many others operated. Her story was individual, yet universal, a powerful mirror reflecting the unspoken realities faced by countless people sidelined by those in power. Her passion was evident, but it was her clarity that truly captivated the audience. Jasmine methodically dismantled the assumptions underpinning the company's culture and Mr. Carter's leadership. She exposed the contradictions between stated values and lived practices, highlighting how rhetoric around diversity and inclusion often masked ongoing exclusion and marginalization. Each point she made was supported by concrete examples, statistics, and personal anecdotes that made her case undeniable. The room remained hushed, the usual murmurs and interruptions replaced by a profound silence. Even Mr. Carter, typically unflappable, appeared momentarily unmoored. His usual posture of authority seemed to falter under the weight of Jasmine's articulate challenge. It was as if her words had struck a chord too deep to be ignored, forcing him and others present to confront uncomfortable truths about their complicity and the structures they upheld. Jasmine's courage was palpable. She spoke not out of anger, but from a place of deep conviction and an unwavering commitment to justice. She refused to be a victim or to seek pity, instead, she demanded accountability and change. This was not a plea but a declaration, a call to action aimed at those who had the power to reshape the narrative and the reality. Her gaze did not waver as she looked directly at Mr. Carter. There was no bitterness, only the firm resolve of someone who knew her worth and was no longer willing to be silenced. Merit, she said, cannot be measured solely by outdated metrics designed to favor a select few. True merit is seen in the resilience, innovation, and contributions of all, especially those who have been marginalized. Her words struck home, challenging the very foundations of the hierarchy he represented. As Jasmine spoke, the impact extended far beyond the walls of the room. The event was being streamed live, shared on social media, and discussed in real time by thousands. Online, viewers were struck by her eloquence and bravery. Clips of her speech quickly circulated, sparking widespread discussion and debate. People identified with her story, many saw in her words reflections of their own struggles. The conversation ignited by this moment began to shift public perception, shining a light on issues often left in the shadows. Back in the room, the shift was tangible. Some board members and executives exchanged glances, their expressions betraying a mix of surprise, guilt, and perhaps admiration. For some, this was a moment of reckoning, for others, a wake-up call. The power dynamics had subtly but irrevocably shifted. Jasmine had transformed from a marginalized voice to the centerpiece of the conversation, commanding respect through her intellect and authenticity. Mr. Carter attempted to respond, his tone controlled but strained. He tried to defend policies and decisions, invoking company records and previous initiatives. Yet, his words lacked the persuasive force they once held. Jasmine had anticipated these defenses and preemptively dismantled them with facts and lived experience. The room's mood was no longer one of blind allegiance but of critical examination. What made this moment truly transformative was Jasmine's ability to convey strength without hostility. Her message was inclusive, She did not seek to divide but to unite by revealing the need for honest dialogue and systemic reform. This approach disarmed many who might have otherwise dismissed her as confrontational or radical. Instead, her reasoned passion invited reflection and empathy. Following Jasmine's address, other voices began to rise. Inspired by her example, colleagues who had remained silent found the courage to share their own stories of exclusion and bias. The meeting evolved from confrontation into a collective confession and call for change. This solidarity underscored the pervasive nature of the issues Jasmine had illuminated and emphasized the necessity of addressing them comprehensively. Outside the immediate setting, the impact continued to reverberate. Media outlets picked up the story, framing it as a watershed moment in the ongoing struggle for equity and representation. Advocates and activists hailed Jasmine's courage as emblematic of a broader movement toward transparency and justice in corporate and social spheres. Her speech became a reference point for discussions on power, privilege, and responsibility. The foundation of established power, once seemingly unshakable, showed signs of cracking. Jasmine's moment of truth disrupted the usual flow of unquestioned authority, exposing the prejudices and blind spots that had been quietly tolerated. It challenged leaders to not only listen but to act to move beyond performative measures toward genuine transformation. Jasmine herself did not seek accolades or fame. Her purpose was singular, to be heard and to make change possible for those who followed. She understood that this moment was both an end and a beginning, a culmination of years of perseverance and the start of a new chapter defined by accountability and hope. Her performance left an indelible mark, not just on those present but on the culture itself. The power of her words, delivered with poise and precision, demonstrated how one voice could disrupt entrenched narratives and inspire collective awakening. It was a testament to the strength found in truth and the courage required to speak it boldly. In the aftermath, the organization was compelled to re-examine its values and practices. Committees were formed, policies revisited, and dialogues initiated with renewed sincerity. While change would not be instantaneous or easy, the barrier to progress had been pierced. Jasmine's moment had cracked open the door, inviting others to step through and build a more equitable future. The transformation was not limited to a single company or event. Jasmine's courage resonated across industries and communities, challenging individuals and institutions alike to reflect on their roles in perpetuating or dismantling systems of inequality. The ripple effect of her words sparked a broader cultural conversation about justice, integrity, and the true meaning of leadership. In this intense, pivotal moment, Jasmine's voice became more than a personal testimony, it became a catalyst for change. Her clarity and conviction shattered complacency and redefined power as something earned through honesty and respect rather than inherited through privilege. The foundations of prejudice and exclusion trembled, not because they were defeated overnight, but because they were finally seen and confronted with unwavering courage. Through this confrontation, the audience witnessed the profound impact of authenticity and resilience. Jasmine's moment of truth was a turning point, a declaration that silence no longer equated to consent and that speaking out was not just an act of bravery but a necessary step toward justice. It was a powerful reminder that real change begins when individuals dare to claim their voice and demand to be heard. Jasmine's life has undergone a profound transformation, one that is felt in the subtle shifts around her as much as in her own evolving sense of self. The silence that once cloaked her existence, the quiet submission she felt compelled to maintain, has finally given way to a voice that is clear, confident, and commanding. This emergence is not abrupt or ostentatious, it is a steady and deliberate reclaiming of space, dignity, and leadership that reshapes not only her own life but also the environment around her. The restaurant where Jasmine works, once a rigid institution governed by hierarchy and fear, has begun to breathe with a new energy. Previously, it was a place where voices were stifled, where deference was expected without question, and where the staff operated under a cloud of unspoken tensions. Jasmine's courage to break through that atmosphere, to confront and challenge the status quo, has acted as a catalyst for change. The restaurant's atmosphere shifts from one of cold formality and quiet endurance to a more dynamic, engaged, and respectful workplace. While the core business remains the same, the interpersonal dynamics evolve, as people begin to feel safer and more empowered to express themselves and collaborate more genuinely. This transformation is reflected in the subtle but telling changes in behavior among Jasmine's colleagues. Employees who were once resigned and disengaged now participate more actively, speaking up with greater confidence and contributing ideas that enhance the workplace. The collective mood softens, and camaraderie strengthens. It is not an immediate revolution but a gradual thawing of the frozen social environment within the restaurant. Jasmine's example becomes a beacon that encourages others to believe in their own ability to assert themselves respectfully and constructively. Mr. Carter, the restaurant's owner and a figure who once epitomized unyielding authority and emotional distance, experiences his own subtle shift. Although his outward demeanor remains largely unchanged, reserved and pragmatic, there is a newfound willingness to listen and consider perspectives he previously dismissed. Jasmine's strength and composure command his attention and force a re-evaluation of his leadership style. He begins to understand that true respect is not achieved through fear or dominance, but through mutual recognition and fairness. This shift is small but significant. It signals the possibility of a more balanced relationship and an environment where leadership is not just about power but about responsibility. Jasmine's personal journey is at the heart of this transformation. She grows into a role of leadership not through force or loud declarations but through quiet determination and integrity. Her voice, once muted by fear and self-doubt, now carries weight and authority. This newfound confidence is grounded in her authenticity. She leads by example, by standing firm in her values, and by advocating for herself and others with both kindness and resolve. Jasmine's leadership style is inclusive and empathetic. She understands the importance of listening and collaboration, and she uses her influence to uplift rather than dominate. Her evolving role changes how others perceive her. Where once she may have been overlooked or underestimated, she is now seen as a credible and inspiring figure. Younger and less experienced staff look to her as a mentor and role model, finding in her journey the encouragement to assert their own voices and pursue their aspirations. Jasmine's impact extends beyond the restaurant's walls, influencing a broader community that recognizes the power of courage and the importance of standing up for one's dignity. The community itself reflects this ripple effect. Jasmine's story becomes a source of hope and motivation for others who have felt silenced or marginalized. She participates in local gatherings and forums, sharing her experiences and encouraging others to challenge the limitations placed on them. Her voice, once confined to the restaurant's backrooms, now resonates in public spaces, helping to foster a culture of empowerment and mutual support. Through her example, a collective movement begins to take shape, one that values respect, equality, and the courage to speak out. Jasmine's family, too, feels the impact of her transformation. Relationships that were once strained or distant begin to heal as her family members recognize her growth and newfound strength. These changes are not dramatic but unfold through more open communication and greater understanding. The shift in Jasmine's demeanor, her confidence and self-respect invites her family to re-evaluate their perceptions and interactions with her. This evolving dynamic nurtures a more supportive and loving environment, allowing Jasmine to feel more grounded and connected. Throughout this journey, the themes of dignity and courage remain central. Jasmine's transformation underscores that dignity is not something to be granted by others but something to be claimed through self-respect and steadfastness. Courage is not the absence of fear but the decision to act in spite of it. Jasmine's story does not conclude with grand triumphs or perfect resolutions. Instead, it embraces the complexities and gradual progress that characterize real change. Her experience highlights that standing up for oneself is an ongoing process, requiring persistence and resilience, especially in the face of entrenched power structures. The quiet power of Jasmine's emergence is perhaps its most compelling aspect. Her voice, once hidden, becomes a tool not only for personal liberation but also for collective transformation. By refusing to remain silent, she disrupts the patterns of invisibility and submission that have long constrained her world. Her leadership symbolizes the potential for renewal within any community or institution, demonstrating how respect and inclusion can grow from acts of courage and integrity. Jasmine's resolution is deeply human and relatable because it acknowledges that change often comes through small, consistent actions rather than sudden upheaval. It celebrates the everyday choices to maintain dignity, uphold one's values, and foster connection. These choices, repeated over time, build a foundation for lasting transformation not only for Jasmine but for all who are touched by her example. In embracing her voice and leadership, Jasmine becomes a symbol of hope and change. She embodies the idea that even in difficult circumstances, individuals can reclaim their power and influence the world around them. Her story reminds us that silence can be broken and that standing up with purpose and respect can create ripples that extend far beyond the initial act. This final stage of Jasmine's journey leaves a lasting thematic impression. Dignity is a fundamental right, courage is a vital strength, and the act of standing up even quietly, steadily, and without fanfare holds the power to redefine lives and communities. Through Jasmine's transformation, the narrative affirms the enduring impact of self-respect and the importance of using one's voice to foster justice and connection. The subtle yet significant shifts in the restaurant, the community, and Mr. Carter's world reflect the broader possibilities that arise when individuals choose to break free from silence. Jasmine's emergence as a leader, her reclamation of identity, and her fostering of respect mark the beginning of a new chapter not only in her life but also in the lives of those around her. Her story is a testament to the strength found in vulnerability, the courage born from conviction, and the change that is possible when one refuses to be invisible.